Nia Robinson clutched her seatbelt as the man in the dark suit leaned closer, his voice low and sharp. "If you can't move on your own, we'll reseat you ourselves." Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her trembling hands folded in her lap, refusing to budge. She had earned this seat, and no one was going to take it away without a fight. Nia Robinson could barely sit still. She was perched at Gate 42A of Atlanta International Airport, swinging her sneakers under the chair, the worn spine of her favorite Galaxy book clutched tightly in her lap. It wasn't just any book, it was the one her mom had given her when she was 6, the one with dog-eared pages and notes scribbled in the margins about stars, black holes, and the endless possibilities that lived above her. Today wasn't just any day either. After completing a grueling 2-week science camp, the kind where the counselors talked to you like you were already a real engineer, Nia was finally going home. But this wasn't a regular trip back. For the first time ever, she was flying first class. Every few minutes she slid her hand into her pocket just to make sure the boarding pass was still there, like it might vanish if she wasn't careful. First class. VIP. Priority boarding. She didn't know what all of it meant exactly, but it sounded big and important, and for the first time, she felt big and important too. Her mom, Michelle Robinson, wasn't the kind of woman who threw money around just because. She worked late nights, led tech teams bigger than some small companies, and still managed to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. This ticket was her way of saying, "I see you, Nia. I see your hard work." The speakers overhead crackled to life, announcing the start of boarding. Nia sprang up, yanking her little backpack higher onto her shoulders, heart hammering against her ribs. When they called for first-class passengers, she moved forward, feeling every pair of eyes following her small frame as she bypassed the long lines of travelers. Some people smiled warmly. Others looked puzzled, like they weren't sure if she was in the right place. One woman even craned her neck, searching the crowd for a parent who wasn't there. Nia just clutched her ticket tighter, handed it to the gate agent with shaky fingers, and walked the long jet bridge to the plane. Her chest buzzed with a strange mixture of nerves and pride. Seat 3A. Window seat. She spotted it right away, a wide leather chair that looked more like something you'd find in a fancy living room than on an airplane. The headrest was soft, and a neatly folded blanket sat waiting on the armrest. She pressed her palm into the seat cushion and almost giggled. It was softer than her bed at home. Settling in, she carefully tucked her book into the seat pocket and turned to the window, watching the dance of luggage carts and neon-vested workers moving like tiny, important ants below. Maybe this was what success felt like. Maybe this was just the beginning. But not even 20 minutes later, her dream-come-true moment took a strange, cold turn. Nia was tracing invisible constellations on the window with her fingertip when she heard footsteps approach. A flight attendant appeared beside her seat, her smile polished and tight like the kind worn by people who had been told to smile even when they didn't feel it. She leaned in, lowering her voice into a syrupy sweet tone that immediately put Nia on edge. "Hi there, sweetheart," the woman said. "Would you mind helping us out today?" Nia blinked, confused. She hadn't done anything wrong. She sat up straighter like her mother had taught her, polite and alert. "We have a special guest who needs a bit of extra space," the woman continued, tilting her head like she was speaking to a much younger child. "Would you be a big helper and switch seats? We'll find you a nice spot a little further back." Nia gripped the armrest, heart thudding. 1,000 thoughts crowded her mind, but none made it to her mouth. She shook her head slightly and said, as firmly as she could, "I'd really like to stay here, please." She remembered her mom's voice coaching her, "Always be respectful, but don't let anyone make you small." The flight attendant's smile faltered for a heartbeat before snapping back into place. "I know you like this seat, honey," she said with a little laugh that didn't sound funny at all, "but we have a very important passenger who needs it. You're such a smart young lady, I know you understand." Nia's face burned. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to seem difficult. But something felt wrong, like an invisible hand pressing on her chest. She looked around quickly. Almost every other seat in first class was filled, with adults. All of them white. She was the only black passenger. She swallowed hard. My mom got me this seat, she said quietly. I really would like to stay. For just a flash, the woman's expression changed, her jaw tightened, but then she turned briskly on her heel. We'll be right back, she said, the words clipped and sharp now. Nia sat frozen, her sweaty palms glued to the armrests. She didn't know what she had done wrong. She hadn't misbehaved. She hadn't even made a sound. But inside, a sick knot twisted tighter in her belly. Was it because she was young? Was it something else she didn't want to think about but couldn't ignore? Before she could gather her scattered thoughts, the flight attendant returned, and this time she wasn't alone. A man in a dark suit, his airline badge gleaming on his jacket, stood beside her. His smile was even tighter than the flight attendant's, and it didn't reach his eyes. Good afternoon, young lady, he said, crouching slightly so he was at eye level. We're really hoping you'll reconsider moving to another seat. It would be a huge help. Nia stared at him, the words piling up behind her teeth but refusing to come out. The man's smile widened, like he was offering a prize. You'll still get all the first-class amenities, he said smoothly. We just need you to shift seats, that's all. Nia caught a few passengers turning their heads now, whispers passing from row to row. She felt like she was shrinking in her seat, smaller and smaller, under all those curious stares. My mom, she got me the seat, Nia said, voice barely above a whisper. I want to stay. The flight attendant leaned closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. First class is really for adults most of the time, honey. You'll be much more comfortable back there with other kids. Nia's stomach flipped. There were no other kids. She had walked past every single row in economy. She knew that life for what it was. They didn't think she belonged here. They didn't want her here. And the way they kept pressing, kept smiling with dead eyes, made her realize something even scarier. They weren't going to stop until she gave up. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone tucked into the side pocket. As she grabbed it, the man straightened, his voice cool and rehearsed. If you can't move on your own, he said, loud enough that a few nearby passengers stiffened in their seats, we'll have to reseat you to avoid any delays. Reseat her. Like she was luggage. Like she was a problem to be handled. Nia's heart thundered in her ears. Her thumb scrambled across the phone screen, pulling up the last text from her mom, you're almost home, baby. Call if you need anything. Love you. Without thinking, her fingers flew across the keys. Mom, help. They want me to move. They won't leave me alone. Please hurry. She hit send, then tucked the phone into her lap, her hands folded tightly over it like a shield. Around her, the crew members murmured in low, urgent voices. She could hear the click of overhead bins, the soft shifting of restless passengers. The plane wasn't even in the air yet, but the air around her felt charged, thick enough to choke on. Nia stared straight ahead, willing herself not to cry, biting the inside of her cheeks so hard she tasted metal. She had done nothing wrong. She had earned her seat. She wasn't moving. Not unless her mother told her to. The plane still hadn't moved. Nia Robinson sat stiffly in seat 3A, her hands folded tightly over her phone, the message to her mom sent and hanging in the air like a lifeline. Around her, the buzz of passengers clicking seatbelts and shuffling bags filled the cabin, but it all sounded distant, muffled, like she was trapped behind thick glass. Her heart pounded so hard it almost hurt, and she focused on keeping her breathing steady, remembering every calm-down trick her mom had taught her. Stay rooted. Stay strong. Stay still. Somewhere ahead, near the cockpit, the flight attendant and the man in the dark suit huddled together, speaking in low, frantic whispers. Every few seconds, they flicked nervous glances in her direction, like she was some kind of problem they couldn't figure out how to solve. Nia stayed frozen, determined not to let them see her panic. She had earned this seat. She had done everything right. She wasn't the one causing the delay. Her phone buzzed sharply under her hands, and she nearly jumped. Carefully, shielding it from sight, she slid it into her lap and peeked at the screen. A text from her mom: "Stay put. You're doing great." They're scrambling. Nia let out a slow, shaky breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. She straightened slightly in her seat, just enough to feel bigger. Stronger. She clutched the phone like a secret weapon, willing herself to trust her mother's words. Meanwhile, the energy inside the plane was shifting. It started slow, like a ripple at first. The confident facade of the flight crew who had tried to push her around began to crack. The man in the suit kept rubbing his palms against his pants, his jaw tight. The original flight attendant who had first approached Nia no longer wore her fake smile. Now she looked like she was chewing on glass. Passengers around them started to notice. Murmured conversations floated up from first class and trickled back through the rows. A woman in 5C whispered furiously to the man beside her, her eyes darting toward Nia's row. A guy 2 rows back frowned openly, arms crossed, tapping his foot. Even the pilot's voice sounded different now when it came over the speakers. Gone was the cheerful, smooth announcement tone. Instead, there was a strange, hesitant edge as he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a brief delay as we complete some final checks. Thank you for your patience." Nia's fingers dug into the armrests, but she stayed put. Another buzz. Another text. Her mom again, just spoke to the COO. "Sit tight, baby. They know who you are now." Nia didn't know everything about how airlines worked, but she knew what COO meant. Chief Operating Officer. That was the top of the ladder, or at least close. Her mom wasn't just a concerned parent anymore. She was swinging a bat at the very foundation of this airline. Up near the front, a new face appeared, a different flight attendant in a crisp Navy uniform, walking fast and purposeful down the aisle. She leaned close to the man in the suit, whispering something urgent into his ear. His face went pale almost immediately, his shoulders stiffening like he'd been hit with cold water. The pilot made another announcement, fumbling over his words this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. We'll be underway shortly after we complete some adjustments." Nia could almost feel the entire plane bristling now. Travelers who had been flipping through magazines or scrolling on their phones were now fully alert, heads swiveling, eyes sharp. No one knew exactly what was happening, but they could feel the weight of it. She could too. Another buzz. Another message. Her mom's words calm and firm: "Stay seated. You are doing everything right. Let them show who they are. Let them fall over themselves." She tucked the phone deeper into her lap and focused on the tiny constellation of scratches on the seat back in front of her. She imagined they were real stars, distant and steady. Just like she needed to be. A few tense minutes later, the change was undeniable. The man in the suit approached again, but this time his swagger was gone. He knelt awkwardly beside her seat, keeping his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Miss Robinson," he said, his throat clicking as he swallowed, "there's been a misunderstanding. Of course you're welcome to stay in your seat. We apologize for the inconvenience." Nia stared at him, blinking slowly, not trusting herself to speak without her voice shaking. She nodded once, small and steady. That was all. He stood quickly and retreated to the front of the plane where a small knot of uniformed staff were now gathered, whispering and arguing fiercely. Passengers in first class openly stared now. Some murmured. Some narrowed their eyes. Whatever story the airline had planned to tell, it was unraveling fast. Then, like a crack of thunder rolling through a clear sky, the situation broke wide open. One by one, the original flight attendant, the suited man, and 2 other crew members gathered their belongings and, without ceremony, were escorted off the plane. They didn't make eye contact with anyone. They didn't say a word. They just left, their footsteps heavy and final. The main cabin door slammed shut behind them with a heavy, satisfying thud. A new crew, fresh-faced, tight-lipped, almost painfully polite, moved in to replace them, snapping into position like soldiers taking over a fallen post. Nia stayed still, breathing carefully, her heart still thudding but her spine straighter than it had been all day. Around her, passengers shifted, glancing at her with new expressions. Not pity. Not confusion. Respect. Curiosity. Something different. Something better. The flight restarted almost like nothing had happened. Safety demonstrations were recited. Beverages were offered. Tray tables were locked and seats adjusted. But beneath the normalcy, something hung heavy in the air, unspoken but shared among the passengers. Something important had just taken place. Nia leaned back into her seat, letting herself finally relax just a little, just enough to feel the tension drain slowly from her muscles. But she knew, somehow, deep in her chest, that this wasn't over. That what happened today wouldn't stay hidden behind the closed door of an airplane cabin. That this story had wings of its own. When the wheels of the plane finally touched down in Houston, Nia Robinson sat motionless for a long second, her seatbelt still fastened, her hands gripping the armrests even as the other passengers sprang into motion around her. The announcement about arrival barely registered in her ears. It wasn't until she caught sight of the terminal through the tiny round window, solid ground, real life waiting, that the tight coil inside her chest began to loosen. She gathered her backpack slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on her small shoulders. As she stepped into the aisle, she felt the eyes of the passengers again, but this time there were no puzzled glances or condescending smiles. There were nods. Quiet, knowing nods. A few murmured words, "Good job, kiddo, you stood your ground," drifted past her as she walked toward the front of the plane. She didn't know these people, but somehow, in a way too big for words, they understood. The terminal buzzed with the usual chaos of arrivals, but Nia's heart jumped when she spotted her mother, Michelle Robinson, standing just past the security barrier, tall and steady, her arms wide open. Without hesitation, Nia dropped her bag and ran full speed into them, burying her face in the familiar, safe warmth of her mother's jacket. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Michelle just held her, one hand smoothing down Nia's braids the way she used to when Nia was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Finally, she pulled back and looked Nia in the eyes, her voice low but fierce. "You stood your ground, baby," she said. "I am so proud of you." Nia hadn't realized how much she needed those words until they hit her, warm and heavy and real. They walked toward baggage claim without speaking much, the quiet hum of the airport wrapping around them like a blanket. As they stepped out into the Houston evening, the city lights a blur beyond the glass doors, Nia asked the question that had been burning in her chest ever since she sent that terrified text from seat 3A. "Mom," she said softly, "why me?" Michelle didn't answer right away. She led Nia to the car, helped her climb in, started the engine. Only once they were rolling down the freeway, the night stretching wide and open in front of them, did she speak. "Sometimes," she said, her hand steady on the wheel, "people see what they expect to see. They thought you didn't belong up there. They thought you were small enough to push around." She paused, her voice thickening. "But you're not small, Nia. You're never small. And when someone tries to treat you that way, you stand tall. You plant your feet. You let your voice be heard, even if your hands are shaking." Nia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The words rooted themselves deep inside her, the way seeds find cracks in the pavement and refuse to be crushed. They drove the rest of the way home in a companionable silence, the steady hum of tires on asphalt a comforting soundtrack. But even as Nia settled into the familiar safety of her room later that night, the storm that had started on the plane was gaining strength far beyond her small world. It began quietly enough. A tweet, posted by a passenger from first class, describing a little black girl who had been asked to give up her rightful seat and had stood her ground. The post caught fire, shared and reshared, the words carried on digital winds across the country. By morning, news outlets had picked it up. First local stations, then national ones. Articles were written. Segments were aired. Talk shows buzzed. Social media exploded. The story wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about something bigger. about who gets to belong, about who gets told, in 100 subtle and not-so-subtle ways, that they don't. Reporters called it the first-class stand. Celebrities tweeted messages of support. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Parents hugged their kids a little tighter. Strangers sent letters, real, handwritten letters, thanking Nia for standing up when so many others had been too scared or too tired or too alone. The airline, caught in the blinding glare of public outrage, scrambled. First there was a lukewarm statement, then a full-throated apology. Policies were reviewed. Diversity and sensitivity training programs were promised. And the staff involved, the flight attendant, the uniformed official, and the others, were quietly dismissed, their employment terminated as part of the airline's frantic efforts to contain the fallout. Through it all, Nia stayed close to her mother, watching the storm unfold with a mixture of awe and unease. She hadn't wanted fame. She hadn't wanted attention. She had just wanted to read her book in peace and enjoy the seat she had earned. So when a local news station asked if she would speak, Nia hesitated. But then she remembered the way the man in the suit had crouched in front of her, pretending to offer her a favor while really trying to strip away something she had worked for. She remembered the tight, too sweet smile of the flight attendant. She remembered the hot twist of fear and anger in her gut. She remembered what her mom said about standing tall. So she said yes. She stood in front of the cameras, her small shoulders squared, her hands trembling slightly behind the podium. The lights were hot, the microphones intimidating, but she focused on the faces in the small crowd, the teachers, the parents, the kids, and she spoke. Her voice was steady, if a little soft, and it carried farther than she ever expected. I was taught that if you work for your place, she said, you don't have to move for anyone. Not because you're young. Not because you look different. Not because someone says you don't belong. If you earned it, it's yours. You stay. The words echoed through the room, captured by cameras and microphones, beamed out across televisions and smartphones and radios. Millions of people heard her. Millions listened. She didn't shout. She didn't pound her fists. She didn't need to. Her calm, steady voice was a kind of strength all its own, a reminder that dignity doesn't always come dressed in noise and fire. It often walks in quietly, sits down in its rightful place, and refuses to be moved. In the weeks that followed, policies changed at more than just one airline. Schools adopted new curriculum about rights and representation. Discussions erupted in workplaces, in town halls, around dinner tables. Other kids spoke up about moments they had been made to feel small. Other parents remembered moments they wished they had fought harder. Nia's stand opened a door wider than she could have ever imagined, and behind her, others were stepping through. Sometimes, it turned out, it only took one voice to remind the world who belongs. And sometimes, the smallest voices carried the farthest of all. In telling Nia Robinson's story, I'm reminded of a truth we often overlook in the rush of daily life. Sometimes the most powerful stands aren't loud, dramatic, or wrapped in anger. Sometimes they are quiet, steady, and courageous in the face of fear. Nia didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She simply stayed seated, grounded in the knowledge that she had earned her place. And that simple act rippled out far beyond the walls of that airplane cabin, reminding people across the country, and hopefully around the world, that dignity is not something anyone else gets to give or take away. The lesson here is simple but vital. When you've earned your place, never let someone convince you that you don't belong. It doesn't matter how old you are, what you look like, or where you come from. If you've worked for it, it's yours. You have every right to take up space, to stand your ground, and to do so with calm confidence. Even when your voice trembles, even when your hands shake, standing up for yourself matters. It teaches the people around you what you will and will not accept, and it can inspire others to find their own courage too. I hope that Nia's story encourages all of us to trust the value of quiet strength. You don't have to shout to make an impact. You don't have to fight ugly to fight back. Dignity, patience, and perseverance can be louder than any argument, more lasting than any outburst. And when you stand firm, you're not just protecting your own space, you're helping clear a path for others who will come after you. To everyone who listened to this story today, thank you. Thank you for giving your time, your heart, and your open mind to stories that matter. Here at U.S. Justice Story, we believe that sharing these moments of quiet resistance, everyday courage, and unwavering dignity, is one small way we can all help build a world where justice isn't just a word, but a lived reality for everyone. If Nia's story touched you, reminded you of your own moments of courage, or gave you a spark of strength you needed, please carry that light with you. You never know when it might help someone else find their way. Thank you again for being part of this journey with us. We can't wait to share more true stories of everyday heroes who remind us that justice begins in the smallest, bravest moments.